Good evening to you. For Taylor Sue, I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with this evening's headlines. The U.S. is moving to remove the blockade on Cuba, albeit slowly. The Colombian left-wing rebel group, the FARC, is ready to become a legal political group as peace talks march on. And thousands of refugees resume their attempt to march on Greek border. The United States appears to slowly be moving to open up trade with Cuba and to an easing of the blockade. The U.S. Treasury has now issued new regulations on travel, telecommunications, business operations and banking, as well as remittances in the island. Under the new rules, U.S. companies will now be able to open up offices, stores and warehouses in Cuba. They will also be allowed to open up telecommunications and internet services between the two nations. The move comes as Washington and Havana are warming their relations.
And the goal of some of these policy changes is to deepen our engagement with the Cuban people. I'll just cite one example, and this is something you can get more detail from the Treasury Department on, but some of the policy changes enacted today relate to telecommunications and internet-based services. Ensuring that the Cuban people have greater access to information is one way that we can give them greater opportunity, certainly more exposure to the kinds of values that we prioritize in this country. And we believe that will be in the best interests of our goal of empowering the Cuban people.
Telecommunications devices can now be loaned and leased, not just sold. Telecommunications companies can now open a physical presence on the island. They can actually open a retail office in Havana. Of course, the Cuban government has a key voice in this. They have to allow these activities on their side, but at least these steps will make it easier for U.S. businesses. It removes an obstacle on the U.S. side to get involved.
It is very good for the Cuban people and for those that are there in the U.S. too, so that they can help their relatives. I think that the normalizing of relations between the U.S. and Cuba is the best thing that could have happened, and I hope that the people of the two nations come together and the governments too. We do not need to be in opposition with each other. I am very happy with the relations they are achieving, and the measures the U.S. government is taking are very good for the Cuban people.
And as Cuba prepares to welcome Pope Francis on Saturday, nearly 200 pilgrims have set off from Miami to Cuba to take part in the 3 days of celebrations. Many of them are Cuban-American believers who are visiting the island for the first time in decades. The recent thawing of relations has made it easier for Cuban-Americans to visit the island.
This for me is a dream fulfilled, a dream to be able to go back to Cuba with my mom after so many years, and a promise kept, a promise that I made to her to be able to do this trip together.
The FARC rebel group is ready to become a legal political movement in Colombia. This was announced by their chief negotiator in the peace talks taking place in Havana.
We are ready to address and discuss the procedures to move from being an armed organization to becoming a political movement.
Marquez also explained that an agreement is about to be reached on the critical judicial component of the integral system of truth, justice, reparation, and non-repetition. He added that the guerrilla group has submitted a package of basic proposals to the Colombian government. This has welcomed the FARC's willingness to put down their arms and become legal. A partial agreement on land reform has already been achieved during the talks. The FARC speaker also called for a bilateral ceasefire.
We continue to try to build consensus on a ceasefire and an end to the hostilities, both bilateral and definitive, and we are making progress in the analysis of how to surrender the arms.
A Venezuelan military aircraft crashed near the border with Colombia as it attempted to intercept an illegal aircraft. The fate of the pilots is still unknown.
Yesterday night, a Sukhoi 30 plane of our Bolivarian National Armed Forces, a high-performance aircraft, supersonic fighter-bomber aircraft with strategic scope, suffered an accident during a mission.
Groups linked to paramilitarism on the Colombian-Venezuelan border threw a grenade into a shop in the Venezuelan border state of Táchira. One person was injured.
Un par de motorizados quienes se trasladaban a través de la calle número 4 en el sector centro de la populosa población de San Juan de Colón.
A couple of motorcyclists that came from 4th Street in the central sector of Papusa region of San Juan de Colón threw an explosive hand grenade into a shop, Emma's shoe store. The grenade went towards the person who opens the shop in the morning and had the door half open. And thank God the grenade went in there and went off immediately.
Tenía la Santa María ya a medio abierta. Gracias a Dios que estaba la Santa María a esa altura. El dispositivo.
And now to Bolivia, where the movement to modify the constitution to allow for Morales to run for re-election in the year 2020 continues to grow. Our correspondent in La Paz, Dimitri O'Donnell, has the story.
They came in their thousands from all over the country to support a man they call a hero. Forming part of a broad social movement, the groups are backing Evo Morales to stay on as president. To do this, they will have to amend Bolivia's constitution so Morales can run for re-election in 2020.
Today is a historic day at a national level and globally because the Bolivian people want the president to continue to transform this country.
Evo is the best president of Bolivia and in the world. We have our president. We have Evo.
The plan comes just 8 months after Bolivia's first indigenous president won a third term. But that victory hasn't satisfied Evo Morales' supporters. They want more.
Our President Evo has shown a great deal of skill to govern this country and has given social equality and done a lot to respect our rights.
The carnival-like atmosphere raised hopes that Congress will approve a bill paving the way for this major constitutional reform. But not everyone is in favour of changing the constitution. The opposition says it's a bad move for the country.
First, you have to govern for the people. Then you can think election, re-election, election, and another election. Let's solve the economic problems of our country first.
A recent poll confirmed that 54% of Bolivians were in favour of the president running for another term. Most of the people here today form part of the traditional core that got Evo Morales elected back in 2005, and they're hoping to do the same again to keep him in office until 2025. If the bill is approved by Congress, it will then be put to a referendum, most likely in 2016. If that vote is also carried, the next stage would be to send the bill to the National Assembly for final approval. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
Chileans have started to clean up and rebuild their homes and businesses after the 8.3 magnitude earthquake and resulting tsunami that struck the country 2 days ago. Now, affected residents urged the government to speed up the relief efforts in Coquimbo, where at least one strong aftershock was felt on Friday. A state of emergency was declared after the quake because of the severe damage, which could take weeks to clean up. Soldiers are also patrolling the streets to prevent looting. This was the strongest earthquake recorded in the world this year. Fortunately, the swift evacuation and current strict building regulations helped to keep the death toll low. The Chilean President Michelle Bachelet attended the annual mass to celebrate Chilean independence 205 years ago. She then met with government ministers to discuss the effort to rebuild affected areas. There will be aid sent to the affected north-central area. Officials confirmed that 12 people were killed in the quake and resulting tsunami. It's like going back to the pre-democracy era of the 1890s. That's how President Cristina Fernandez described the decision by 2 Argentinian judges to annul last month's elections in the northern province of Tucumán. The governing Front for Victory party had been declared the winners of the poll. Fernandez said the right-wing opposition had lost and they cannot accept it. The local government is appealing against the ruling. The 6 Mexican tourists who were wounded in an airstrike by Egyptian forces have returned to their country on the presidential plane. They are all in stable condition and have been taken to a public hospital. Their injuries rank from shrapnel wounds to burns, fractures and respiratory ailments. Mexico's Foreign Minister Claudia Ruiz Massieu has called on Egypt to provide compensation to the victims for what she branded an unjustified aggression. And still in Mexico, the volcano of Colima erupted again on Friday morning. Wow, the ashes and smoke have reached 2 kilometers into the air. The Colima volcano has erupted more than 40 times since the 16th century. It has been showing renewed activity over the last 2 months, blanketing nearby villages with ash. Greece's elections will take place this Sunday, and the race between Syriza and the Democracy Party is very close. More on this next.
Facts that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Discover Latin America and the world in our programs. Telesur Reports, The Real USA, the stories behind the tweets. Ataman, Lives, Know Your Body, Open Files. Exposing the conflicts that affect our people. Compelling personal stories and the most controversial events. See it all on telesurtv.net in English. Telesur. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. Greek authorities began to set up polling stations across the country ahead of Greece's general election this coming Sunday. And the leftist Syriza party of former Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has been losing ground. According to polls, the race will be close between Syriza and the conservative New Democracy Party, but neither party seems close to the 38% needed to establish a majority in the 300-seat parliament. About 9.5 million Greeks are expected to cast their vote. And supporters of the party came out in their numbers to stand behind their leader, Alexis Tsipras, whose decision to sign on the dotted line with bailout creditors left many supporters disillusioned. However, Tsipras' main rival, the New Democracy leader, Vangelis Meimarakis, has said that were he to win the presidency, he would maintain the bailout deal and the austerity that comes with it. Many agreed that the election at this point in time is too close to call. In Turkey, refugees are being refused exit from the country, sparking loud arguments and scuffles, rather. Turkish officials have said that refugees would not be allowed to leave unless invited by another country. Refugees had initially arrived in Turkey but refused to stay, citing the country's inadequate economics. Turkey has been open to receiving refugees but has yet to receive sufficient funding assistance from the EU to deal with the crisis. And the European Union insists that it is working on a financial aid package for Turkey, which it says should help some 2 million refugees. The Foreign Minister of Luxembourg, Jean Asselborn, said it was the EU's responsibility to financially support a country which is confronted with such a problem involving huge costs. Turkey is one of the countries which is receiving the most refugees, mostly from neighboring Syria. The United States has admitted that military training programs for Syrian fighters are under review. Here is Hazem Abdullah with more.
The United States has admitted that only 4 or 5 US-trained Syrian fighters remain on the battlefield against militant with the Islamic State, and that the training program is being reviewed as the desired goals are not being met.
The fight against terrorism should be done by training supposed moderates. That is what the United States is doing while claiming it is looking for a political solution, unlike the Russians and Syrians who are clearly fighting terrorism. The United States has to know that moderation is not to destroy the sovereignty of states and their infrastructure using extremists that they have equipped in the region.
The United States had spent about $500 million on the training program, which aims to launch a ground war against the Islamic State by training about 3,500 fighters over the 3 years. But most of the first group of these fighters were either abducted or killed by the Nusra Front terrorists.
They gathered us in the headquarters in the city of Aleppo, and then they transferred us to the training camp in Turkey, where trainees underwent training for a month and a half. The trainees were then given an M16 and $400 and 400 Turkish liras and ammunition.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has said that the results of this program were negligible, as not only did it fail to stop the terrorists, but it also contributed to increasing the number of supporters who wants to join their ranks. Despite this, Moscow announced on Thursday its willingness to provide information to Washington about military technical support with Syria. Hazm Abdullah, Telesur, Syria.
Hundreds of international designers showed off their green projects after a 5-week-long innovation camp in an 18th century French castle. The event, known as POC 21, is an alternative to the COP 21 Climate Change Conference that will take place in Paris from November 30th. Participants designed everyday useful objects which were more environmentally friendly in design and use. These included a $60 wind turbine made out of recycled material and an eco-friendly bike tractor designed to help people on small biofarms.
One of the reasons we started POC21 is a bigger concern about climate change. And we've seen this big new climate summit in Paris at the end of the year. But we said, okay, maybe it's time to not wait anymore for the 21st conference of that kind. And while global emissions have still doubled, so we thought like it needs new ways, new methods, new formats to work on climate change, resource depletion and the problems we have. So POC21 is kind of an alternative model of people actually making and not talking so much and getting to action. And all our results can be shared because they are open source.
Egyptian forces flooded tunnels dug beneath the Gaza-Egypt border in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. The authorities used pipes to pump water from the Mediterranean Sea in an apparent effort to curb the use of the underground passages. The network of tunnels is a vital lifeline for Gaza, bringing in an estimated 30% of all goods that reach the enclave, circumventing a blockade imposed by Israel for more than 7 years.
Yesterday, without notifying us, they flooded water and the tunnels started to collapse. The water flooded us, the water pressure started to hit us and throw us out. Some of my relatives started drowning. My body is bruised. The water started to surface here in Palestine town. We make a living from the tunnels, and now we won't because of the water. Sisi destroyed us with water and destroyed the Palestinian border. We're asking the people to stop water because it reached our houses and destroyed our houses. We're asking the people to stop the water so we can make a living from the tunnels.
Palestinian groups clashed with Israeli security forces in Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank after Islamic movement Hamas called for a so-called Day of Rage over tensions as the Al-Aqsa Mosque. 5 Palestinians were arrested and 3 Israeli police were injured when a firebomb struck their van in Jerusalem. And now a brief of other stories making headlines across the globe.
Fighters from Pakistani Taliban stormed an Air Force station near Peshawar, resulting in a firefight with security forces. At least 43 people have been killed, and according to Pakistani military's media wing, at least 21 of them were security officers. 5 civilians were among the victims, and around 20 wounded military personnel were taken to hospital. This assault was the first major attack conducted by the Pakistan Taliban since the Peshawar school massacre in December. Japan is set to pass the security bills that will allow Japanese troops to fight on foreign soil for the first time since World War II. This, despite almost daily rallies in a show of public anger against the ruling coalition of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that wants to vote the controversial bills into law. Opponents argue the new laws, which would allow the tightly restricted military to fight in defense of allies and could see the country dragged into American wars across the globe. Meanwhile, China expressed concern over any expansion of Japanese military might.
We call on Japan to listen carefully to voices inside and outside the country calling for justice. Draw on lessons from history, continue on the path of peaceful development, and act with caution in security and military matters, and take real actions to protect regional stability and peace.
And finally, a march against harsh austerity by Finland's government drew a crowd of some 30,000 people to the capital Helsinki. Plans to battle the country's suffering economy came in the form of slashed wages, allowances and holidays. Protesters say that poor workers should not have to pay for the mistakes of corporate entities.
Russia has launched its countdown to the 2018 FIFA World Cup. The capital's Red Square was transformed into a soccer pitch as the event kicks off in 1,000 days. The event was attended by soccer stars and high-ranking officials. Russia will host the tournament in 11 different cities across the country. Argentine businessman Alejandro Brusaco, who is the former chairman of an Argentina-based sports marketing business, appeared in a federal court in the United States. This after he was extradited from Italy in August to face corruption charges in the FIFA scandal, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud and racketeering. He is subject to travel restrictions and electronic monitoring, and his bond was set at $20 million. And finally, this Friday evening, crowds in the Argentine capital of Buenos Aires were spellbound by the night sky being lit up with pyrotechnics, light displays, and performances from the French collective known as Group F. The impressive display kicked off the Buenos Aires International Festival, which runs until October 4th. Performers who were dressed in otherworldly suits comprised of LED lights took to the stage amid a backdrop of colorful fireworks and dramatic music. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From all of us here, our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great weekend.